If a fire breaks out in like a crowded hospital, you can't just yell at everyone to run out the front door.
Right, it's just not an option.
Exactly, because you're dealing with patients hooked up to life support machines, you've got surgical wards, and, well, you're dealing with people who physically just cannot walk.
Yeah, it's a complete logistical nightmare. A rapid evacuation is almost impossible in that setting.
Right. And in that scenario, prevention isn't just like the best strategy, it is literally the only strategy.
Absolutely.
And today, we're going to look at how a single, honestly kind of mundane-looking piece of paper tries to stop that exact nightmare before it ever even starts. Because today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2026.
Which is the official kickoff for National Fire Service Week, running from today all the way through the 20th.
Yeah. And for this deep dive, we're zeroing in on one very specific source. It's an awareness poster designed for this exact week.
And, on the surface, it really just looks like your standard run-of-the-mill bureaucratic safety material.
Oh, totally. Like you'd walk past it in a hallway and barely even register it.
Yeah, but it is actually this incredibly dense, layered artifact. It really reveals the hidden complexity of the everyday world around us.
Yeah, it tells this whole story about how our physical infrastructure and our cognitive psychology and community behavior all have to work together just to keep us alive.
It really highlights the hidden mechanisms of public safety, because when you actually sit down and decode the visual and textual choices being made on this simple poster, you start to see a blueprint.
A blueprint for what? Exactly.
For how institutions attempt to communicate a literal matter of life and death to millions of people simultaneously.
Right.
It's not just about pointing at a fire and saying hot. It's an attempt to alter an entire culture's baseline behavior.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really want you listening right now to think about the spaces you occupy every single day. We're going to examine how this specific safety campaign tries to rewire how you interact with those spaces.
It's fascinating.
And we're starting with this massive paradigm shift in how we even define fire safety. Because if you look at the top banner of this poster, it features three very prominent corporate logos. We've got Blue Star, Noida International Airport, and Tata Projects Limited.
Which tells us a whole lot about who is actually responsible for keeping a building from burning down.
Well, yeah, and that's what's so striking to me. Like, it looks like the credits of a major blockbuster movie, but instead of film studios, it's a massive infrastructure coalition. We usually think of fire safety as a purely governmental function, right?
Yeah, most people picture a city fire inspector walking around with a clipboard, checking the dates on fire extinguishers.
Exactly. But here we have an HVAC and mechanical engineering company, a massive new international airport, and a giant structural construction firm headlining a public safety campaign. I mean, it feels a bit like walking into a corporate boardroom instead of a firehouse.
It really does. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the fundamental reality of modern survival in public spaces.
Yes.
Well, we all share this culturally romanticized idea that fire safety begins the exact moment the alarm rings. The sirens wail and the fire trucks roll out of the station.
Right, the heroes rushing in.
Exactly. But the truth is, reactive safety is the absolute last resort. True fire safety begins years, sometimes even a decade, before a spark is ever lit.
Wow.
It starts on the drafting tables of mega projects like the Noida International Airport.
So you're talking about the engineered environment, like proactive safety.
Precisely. Let's look at the actual mechanics of those logos.
Yeah.
Take Blue Star, for example. They're a company known for really complex HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Okay, so air vents and stuff.
Right. In a massive structural fire, the flames are dangerous, obviously, but the smoke is what usually kills people. And how that smoke is managed is entirely dependent on hidden mechanical systems.
Wait, so if a fire starts, say, in a restaurant kitchen at a massive airport terminal, the HVAC system doesn't just shut off? Because I would assume you'd want to turn off the fan so you don't feed the fire.
Shutting off completely might actually be disastrous. What modern engineered HVAC systems do during a fire is they instantly shift into life safety mode.
Life safety mode.
Yeah, they create what are called pressure zones. The system will automatically create negative air pressure in the exact zone where the fire is located.
Meaning it, like, sucks the air out of that specific room?
Exactly. It exhausts the smoke to the outside while simultaneously starving the actual fire of oxygen.
Oh, wow.
But, and this is the crucial part, at the very same time, the system pumps fresh air into the surrounding safe corridors and the emergency stairwells. That creates positive air pressure.
Okay, so negative pressure on the fire, positive pressure in the hallways.
Right. And that positive pressure acts like an invisible wall. It actively pushes against the doors so smoke physically cannot bleed into the escape roads.
That is wild.
Your ability to just breathe while running down a stairwell is completely reliant on a mechanical engineering firm programming those airflows years in advance.
Okay, that completely changes how I look at an air vent. I mean, I'm never going to unsee that now. And I assume the same kind of invisible preparation applies to a construction giant like Tata Projects.
Oh, absolutely. Tata Projects is pouring the concrete, they're erecting the structural steel.
And steel doesn't burn.
It doesn't burn, no, but at high temperatures, it completely loses its structural integrity. It essentially turns to spaghetti.
Oh, right. So the building could just collapse.
Exactly. So the construction firm has to apply these highly specialized intumescent paints and fireproofing materials directly to that steel.
Intumescent.
Yeah, it's a material that's engineered to physically swell up when exposed to extreme heat. It creates this really thick, insulating char layer that protects the core temperature of the steel.
Which buys the building time.
It buys minutes. And in a fire, minutes are the currency of survival. So by placing their logos right at the top of a National Fire Service Week poster, these companies are signaling something really important.
But they're the ones actually doing the heavy lifting.
That fire prevention isn't just an afterthought or some government compliance checklist. It is baked into the very DNA of our infrastructure.
Right. But engineering and concrete can only do so much, right? I mean, a negative pressure zone and some fireproof steel just buy you time. When the engineered systems are finally overwhelmed or when the evacuation actually needs to happen, you are relying entirely on human reaction.
Yeah, the transition from the invisible infrastructure to the visible human element.
And the way this campaign executes that visually is, well, honestly, it's completely baffling at first glance.
Do you think so?
Yeah. I mean, let's move to the midsection of the poster. It features 3 different firefighter graphics, and they clash so hard aesthetically that I honestly have to stop and push back here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
On the far left, there is this very basic, very practical red fire engine with crew members standing by. Then in the dead center, there's this hyper-dramatic, really gritty silhouette of 3 firefighters holding an axe against these roaring flames. It looks like a movie poster.
Oh, yeah, the heroic framing.
Yeah. And then on the right, there is this brightly colored, almost cartoonish action graphic of a single animated firefighter aggressively spraying a hose. Honestly, it looks like a stressed intern just slapped 3 totally different pieces of clip art together 10 minutes before the printing deadline. Like, are we sure we are overthinking this? Maybe it's just bad design.
I get why you'd say that. And it is very easy to just dismiss it as bad graphic design.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at the cognitive psychology of visual communication, especially for ambient media like a safety poster, that aesthetic clash is actually a highly functional, deliberate tool.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that because to me it just looks messy.
Think about how people actually consume a poster in the real world.
Right.
They don't stand in front of it and analyze it like a painting in a museum.
No, they're usually walking right past it.
Exactly. They're walking down a hallway or rushing through a transit hub or sitting in a break room checking their phone. You realistically have about 1.5 seconds of ambient viewing time to inject a message into their brain.
1.5 seconds. That's nothing.
It's very fast. And this poster has to work for a radically diverse audience. It has to reach everyone from a 50-year-old corporate executive to a 6-year-old walking down a school corridor.
So you're saying one unified visual style wouldn't capture everyone's attention in that tiny 1.5 second window?
Unlikely. Because the brain processes different types of imagery in entirely different ways. Let's take that really dramatic, gritty silhouette in the center that you mentioned.
The movie poster one.
Right. High contrast silhouettes remove individual identity. They elevate the figure into this mythic archetype. When an adult brain processes that specific image, it bypasses the literal and hits the emotional center.
Oh, I see.
It registers danger, courage, and solemn duty. It demands respect from an adult demographic.
But a mythic dark silhouette like that might just look scary or, I don't know, incomprehensible to a kindergartner.
Exactly. The cognitive load is just too heavy for a child who just needs to know who the good guys are. And that is exactly why the flanking images exist. The bright red fire engine and the energetic, colorful firefighter spraying in the hose, those are grounded in everyday literal readiness.
Right.
They trigger instant recognition. A child sees the bright yellow helmet, and the water hose, and their brain instantly categorizes it. Okay, those are the helpers.
Okay, so it's like a cognitive shotgun approach. By placing these totally clashing styles right next to each other, the poster ensures that your peripheral vision will catch whichever visual frequency your specific demographic is tuned to.
Exactly.
The adult registers the gravity of the silhouettes, while the kid registers the safety of the fire truck.
It perfectly balances the absolute terrifying reality of the danger with the reassuring practical reality of the response. It ensures the visual vocabulary translates across every age and cognitive development level.
Wow. Okay, I stand corrected. The intern knew what they were doing. But, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because visuals grab our attention, sure, but the text right below them completely changes the priority of the entire campaign. It does. The focus suddenly snaps away from the heroic firefighters holding the axes, and it zeroes in entirely on the civilian environments they're trying to protect.
And this is where the campaign defines its actual stakes.
The English text right in the center reads, "Safe school, safe hospital, and fire safety-aware society." Which brings us right back to our opening thought. Putting school and hospital right next to each other in the context of fire safety, that's about identifying peak vulnerability.
It's focusing on the environments where evacuation is the absolute least viable option.
Yeah, earlier I mentioned that a hospital during a fire is a logistical nightmare. And I always think of a massive hospital or like a sprawling school complex as being similar to a giant ship at sea.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, because if something goes catastrophically wrong, the people inside are essentially trapped by their own environment. You can't just jump overboard.
Let's take that ship analogy a step further, actually, because it perfectly illustrates the engineering we talked about earlier.
Okay.
On a submarine or a large ship, survival depends entirely on watertight compartments. If a section floods, you seal the heavy steel doors to isolate the water so the rest of the ship stays buoyant.
Right.
Modern hospitals and schools are built using the exact same logic, but for smoke and fire.
They're compartmentalized.
Yes. They use heavy fire doors, specialized fire-resistant drywall, and those negative air pressure zones we discussed. The building is fundamentally designed to chop itself into sealed boxes to isolate the hazard.
To keep the smoke from spreading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here is the critical flaw in that system, and the real reason the poster adds the phrase, fire safety-aware society, right after safe schools and hospitals.
Because human behavior can break the system.
You nailed it. The most advanced negative air pressure system in the world and the most expensive fire doors are completely neutralized if a single nurse wedges a fire door open with a trash can just because they want a breeze in the hallway.
Oh, wow. Right.
Or if a school janitor decides to store highly flammable cleaning chemicals in a stairwell that's designated as a clean evacuation route, well, the structural engineering is suddenly rendered useless.
You've breached the hull of the ship.
You've breached the hull.
Yeah.
So the poster explicitly linking the physical buildings to an aware society is this profound admission that safety is not a product you can simply buy from Tata Projects or Blue Star.
Right.
It is a continuous daily behavior that has to be practiced by every single person walking those halls.
Man, that is a staggering amount of responsibility to put on the general public. It's basically saying, hey, we built the safest box possible and we trained the bravest responders to come get you. But if you prop that one door open, you've compromised the entire multi-million-dollar ecosystem.
It completely pulls the concept of fire safety out of the realm of someone else's job, like the engineers or the fire department, and places it squarely into the realm of civic duty. The ultimate invisible fire break is an observant, educated public.
Which brings us to the final hurdle. If the goal is to create this hyper-vigilant, aware society that doesn't, breach the hull, you have to find a way to communicate that civic duty to literally everyone.
You can't leave anyone out.
No. And this poster attempts to solve that through language, which brings us to the translation at the bottom.
The translation strategy is arguably its most vital mechanical feature.
So the primary call to action is printed in English, together for fire prevention. But immediately below it, the campaign provides the exact translation in Hindi. And it's not just a casual small print edition. It is bolded, it's mirrored, and visually weighted to be just as important as the English text.
What's really fascinating here is the specific phonetic choice made in that Hindi translation for the concept of together. The campaign specifically uses the word ekjut.
Ekjut. Okay, unpack the nuance of that word for us because, translation is rarely just swapping one dictionary definition for another, right?
Definitely not. Ekjut carries a much heavier sociological resonance than just simply being in the same room as someone else. It translates more closely to being united as a singular, cohesive entity.
Okay.
It implies a knot that cannot be untied.
Yeah.
When the campaign asks for an ICTRA approach to fire prevention, it is asking for a unified front that completely ignores traditional social boundaries.
Which makes perfect sense, because fire is the ultimate equalizer. The actual physics of combustion do not care about human social boundaries.
No, fire does not check your bank account before it spreads. It doesn't care about your caste, your education level, or what language you happen to speak at home.
Right.
The toxic smoke from burning plastic will fill the corridor of a luxury VIP airport terminal at the exact same speed it will fill the hallway of an underfunded public school.
So the awareness campaign basically has to be just as indiscriminate as the threat itself.
It has to establish a shared vocabulary for survival. By presenting this call to action bilingually, the campaign is making absolutely sure that the corporate executive walking through the airport lobby in a tailored suit and the day laborer who actually poured the concrete for that exact same lobby receive the identical urgent message.
It totally democratizes the burden of survival. When you read that word, Ekjut, it implies that you, like you listening to this right now, are bound to the exact same social contract as the mechanical engineers at Blue Star.
Yep.
And you are on the same team as those firefighter silhouettes holding the axe.
Exactly. If one of you fails, the whole system fails.
Wow.
You become the final piece of the infrastructure. We have the physical infrastructure of the concrete and steel. We have the emergency infrastructure of the fire engines and alarms. But neither of those function without the social infrastructure of an aware, united society.
It is genuinely remarkable how much depth is just hidden in plain sight. I mean, we started this deep dive looking at a single everyday awareness poster for National Fire Service Week, starting today, April 14th, 2026. Literally a poster you would probably ignore while checking your phone in an elevator lobby.
But once you understand the visual and linguistic mechanics behind it, it becomes a completely different document.
It really does. We followed the thread from the proactive, engineered safety of those negative pressure zones designed in corporate boardrooms. We analyzed the cognitive psychology of how our brains process heroic silhouettes versus approachable fire trucks in a fraction of a second.
Right.
We looked at the terrifying vulnerability of our schools and hospitals, realizing that a single propped open door can sink the entire ship. And finally, we saw how a simple bilingual call to be Ekjut, to be an inseparable knot, places the ultimate responsibilities squarely on us.
It outlines the entire anatomy of how a society attempts to organize itself against a shared chaotic threat.
So, what does this all mean? We have decoded the corporate logos, we've analyzed the psychology of the graphics, and we've discussed the sociology of the translations. We've established that this campaign is practically begging us to become a fire safety aware society. But you know, awareness as a concept is completely passive until the exact moment it translates into physical action.
Which is the core challenge left to the listener today.
Exactly.
Because the campaign can build the safest airport, right? It can print the most psychologically compelling graphics, and it can translate the message perfectly across every language, but absolutely none of that matters if the individual doesn't participate.
So we want to leave you with a final thought today, a way to test if you are actually part of the aware society this poster is trying so hard to build. As you sit listening to this deep dive right now, whether you are relaxing on your couch at home, whether you are working at a desk in a high-rise office building, or even if you're just walking through a crowded public space or transit hub,
just take a look around your immediate environment. Look at the walls. Look down the corridors. Do you actually, right in this specific second, know exactly where your nearest fire exit is?
Yeah, do you?
Do you know the exact route you would take if the lights suddenly went out and that hallway filled with smoke? Because if you don't know where that exit is, you are passively relying on the invisible infrastructure of the builders to save you. You are simply hoping that someone else has done the work to keep you alive. But if you take those 5 seconds right now to locate that door, to mentally map that short path, well, then you aren't just relying on the system anymore. You have finally become an active, participating piece of the social infrastructure that keeps us all safe.